Hi, Graham. Thanks for joining me this morning.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm pretending out to be out in the wild industrial glory of Teesside, but I'm actually hiding out in the back. So, can you introduce us yourself and tell us a little bit about your involvement with creative arts?
My name's Graham Williamson. I'm a filmmaker and film critic, which is a risky double bill of jobs to have, but I carry it off. And I also play bass and various other instruments in the band Let's Trim Our Hair in Accordance with the Socialist Lifestyle.
Well, I didn't know about that. Terrific. So, it seems like you have quite a few interests of. Have you always had these? Have you always been involved creatively? Did you come from a creative background? Has it all happened?
I've always been creative ever since I was a child. I used to draw a lot and make comic strips, and after a while, the drawing kind of faded away, I guess, and I just became more interested in storytelling as its own thing.
And were you encouraged in that? Did you have a champion, a teacher?
I think all of my art and English teachers were really good, and my parents and grandparents were really excited when they found out that I was, a keen drawer, a keen artist. So yeah, I was always encouraged. Yeah.
Great. So, can you tell us a little bit about your work as a filmmaker?
At the moment, I've been working for a while on a documentary with Ian Payne called Where the Stone Dropped, which is about a community that's formed on a place near us called South Gare, which was built in the Victorian era to try and reroute the River Tees. There was a problem getting the ships that were necessary up the river to the various factories that they needed to go to. So they just built this huge man-made peninsula, and it's it's incredibly basic. Like when we think of Victorian architecture and engineering, we think of people like Brunel and all these real wizards of the form, but they just threw concrete blocks in the river until it was a different shape. And now, obviously, a lot of that industry is gone, but it's become a haven for wildlife. There's a lot of bird watchers there. There's a lot of fishermen and crabbers there. There's a lot of people who just like staying out there because it's this nice place. It's become accidentally a great place for water skiers and waterboarders because it has all of the sea air channeled in. There's a really strong wind there, but because it's artificial, it's very shallow. So if you fall off, you're in no trouble.
Brilliant. It's yeah, really interesting. All over Teesside, things that have been repurposed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I learned quite a lot about all the work that was done to be able to bring the big ships into Middlesbrough Dock,
Yeah.
and how important that was in the whole, the Stockton Darlington Railway really just being a play toy, really just a
Mm.
fun thing until the dock was created at Middlesbrough.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah, the whole area comes from those docks more than anything else. And it is fascinating that now it's gone from being this smoky industrial kind of place to a place where if you want to see a rare bird, you get up there. If you want to see some porpoises, we saw porpoises up there chasing after the boats. It's become a really wonderful reclaimed space.
Yeah, and I think this is something that's really overlooked about Teesside, how much incredible natural beauty there was. It was really heartwarming to see the Gone Fishing Christmas special,
Yes. Yeah.
cast in a different light on the area, and really, really positive to see all that. It was really terrific.
Because, of course, you and I know that if you go out for 20, 30 minutes drive, you'll find yourself in the middle of some beautiful countryside. But that obviously isn't the image of Teesside. And part of me is quite happy to keep it for ourselves, but I was also, as you say, very happy to see it's celebrated on television as well.
Yeah, it is interesting because at the moment it's like we've got all the things that you need for really sort of important to an emerging creative scene. We've got venues of all different levels so that you can work your way up and hone your craft. But we've also got fairly cheap studios and workspace.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? When anywhere gets too much notice, that all gets, the landlords start cashing in.
Yeah, and it's important that it survives too, because one of the films that I didn't finish was a film on the art scene, and particularly the live music scene around Teesside. And I filmed most of it over the winter of 2011, 2012, and I isolated a lot of stuff that I needed to finish it off. And then my camera broke, and by the time I'd saved up and got a replacement, I was going back into those spaces, and everyone had moved on. Everyone was doing an office job now who I'd been filming, and I guess the scene is still there, but you've lost all your characters. It's very hard to keep a foothold when the area is in the economic shape that it has been in for a long time, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really interesting. This actually, I find, because I was kind of I was in the generation that was kind of brought up to abandon our dreams and
Yeah.
go and get proper jobs. And it has actually been really good in this interview project to find that generally the people of the younger generation have been encouraged and supported, like emotionally and financially, by their parents in order to go and try and fulfill their dreams, perhaps because this notion of having a proper job that's going to last forever and treat you well and support you, and if you just work
Yeah.
then it's all going to be cushy, I think we've all realized is a bit of an illusion.
And that kind of job insecurity is, that's obviously a very modern thing that I think a lot of people don't realize how bad it is unless they're in that situation themselves. But it's also been kind of going on forever. I remember when I was getting into art and I was very fascinated by this idea of the Bohemians and the sort of Weimar scene of the 20s. I thought, oh, that must be incredible. I wonder how they got away with it. I wonder how they lived so freely. And the answer is they all have rich parents, basically, that as soon as things started to get a bit hairy, they could go back to their mum and dad's mansion. The only person from that generation who I think was actually working class was Alice Prin, famous as Kiki de Montparnasse, the artist's model, and she died in poverty, completely forgotten. So the number of role models you have for the life you want to lead is not great.
Yeah, really interesting, really interesting. It's like a lot of them played with being working class or living in complete poverty, even being homeless.
Yeah,
They
they
always had,
found that as romantic as rich people tend to do. Yes.
but it's always different. Like these politicians who were going to live 1 week on universal credit. It's like,
Yes. Yeah,
what's that going to teach you? And no matter how desperate it gets, you've got your actual life to go back to.
exactly. Yeah.
Very interesting. So, as a film critic, who do you write for, and is that freelance?
It is freelance, yeah. At the moment, I've been writing for a very long time for The Geek Show, which is a local website and a local podcast network. And I've been doing their film podcast, Cinema Eclectica, for about 5 or 6 years now. We wrapped it up earlier this year, in part because general movie podcasts just aren't doing well enough anymore. There's one of the things about doing a podcast for 5 or 6 years is that that is an eternity in podcast terms. And it's gone from being an era where podcasts were, at least podcasts that weren't backed by a big media conglomerate, were quite unusual. And you could make a reasonably big splash just by being a bunch of guys chatting about the latest movies. And now there's millions of those, and you have to have an angle. So in the new year, we're starting up Pop Screen, which is a new podcast based on something that I've always been fascinated by, which is where pop music and movies meet, whether it's a biopic, a film starring a pop star, film directed by a pop star, anything that's on that crossroads. And that's been really exciting because it's so diverse. You're dealing with, actual legitimate masterpieces like The Man Who Fell to Earth and A Hard Day's Night, and you're dealing with a load of films that should never have been made. You're covering every end of the quality spectrum.
Funny. Yeah, I was interviewing Graham Farrow the other day.
Mm.
And he's mates with the guy whose name I should remember, who directed Quadrophenia.
Oh, Frank Rodham, yeah.
Yeah, and he was saying that the filming of that got delayed a few weeks because Keith Moon died just as they were about to start filming. So
He did, yeah.
no one was quite in the mood for it.
And it's Quadrophenia is a great example of what I think is interesting about pop movies, because it's made in the late 70s and set in the early 60s. And I think that whenever you make a pop movie that's set in the past, it becomes about the era it's made in. Like, if you want to go through Quadrophenia with a fine-tooth comb and say that record wasn't released for another 2 years, that haircut didn't come in for another 18 months, you can do that. But you don't want to, because when you watch it now, you think, my God, this is the first great British film of the Thatcher era. It sums up that age so beautifully.
Absolutely, yeah. Hugely impactful on me as a kid.
Mm.
So forgive me, I've forgotten the name of your band.
That's great, because I always enjoy saying it. It's Let's Trim Our Hair in Accordance with the Socialist Lifestyle. We named ourselves after a North Korean propaganda broadcast. That is a real thing, which has only become more topical. There was a sort of brief moment back in about 2017 where we thought, if World War III starts over all this, do we change our name? Does it become like, I remember the lead singer of Anthrax straight after 9/11 was talking about, everyone came up to him on the street and said, wouldn't it be funny if you got one of them Anthrax letters? And he thought, no, I'd actually rather not die. But we rode it out.
Wow, amazing. And so are you a like traditional band outfit? What kind of genre are you?
Well, yeah, it was something I came on board after my friends Joe and Ollie had been doing it for a couple of years, and they were more of an electronic band because that was what they played. But I came on board with more live instruments. I'd had a bass for years, but I'd never really got into playing it, and it really sort of took me into how enjoyable playing bass is. And it's now, I guess, a kind of post-rock thing, although it circles around a few places. We exist purely on Bandcamp. We're very kind of studio-based, tinkery. We always make jokes about playing live, and I would hate every second of that. I would find it really frustrating after like literally years of trying to get the right layering on some of the tracks to just have to play them as a three-piece setup. It would sicken me. So I'm very happy this being just something that lives on Bandcamp at the moment.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I'll have to check that out. So how's lockdown affected your various creative practices?
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, really. It feels like there's been about 7 different lockdowns for me, because at the start it was just bitterly disappointing, because me and Ian had, when the stone dropped lined up, we'd been to Arc. They said, because they'd helped fund it in the first place, that they would be delighted to hold a premiere, say about February, January. And it all seemed to be going great, but that got delayed in part because there was still a bit of paperwork to complete, a few permissions to do with filming on land that is owned by PD Ports had to be signed off. So we did that, and then it becomes lockdown, and that's, I mean, it's crushing at first. And then, I mean, that early spring was a really mild, really sunny spring, and I found that really creative. I love that kind of weather. It really helps my mood. So I wrote a lot, and I started lining up things that I was going to do as soon as we got out of lockdown. And then it just went on, and it became harder to make money, and I started to lose writing jobs. And it's all been up and down. I think the most consistent problem that I've had is that I can't gauge people's mood because I'm shut away from people. Like, I'm not a massively sociable guy. I think the careers that I've chosen speak of someone who is actually really happy just being sat on a laptop writing for hours on end. But I didn't realize how much I'd missed being out among people and getting a sort of sense of the vibe that's around and thinking maybe people are ready for something that's a bit like this. You know, maybe people are going to start watching or listening to things that are in this vein. And when you shut away from people and you have this completely unprecedented thing on top of it, you don't know what people are ready for. You know, I don't know what sort of art anyone is going to seek out once lockdown ends because I have nothing to compare it to. And it happens even to people who were very successful. You know, I remember at the start of lockdown seeing Dua Lipa looking really upset because she just released this big disco album at a time when all the clubs were shut and being like genuinely uncertain whether this looked massively insensitive, whether, you know, you're in this situation where people are dying and suddenly I'm releasing a big party album about falling in love. It turned out that was what people wanted to hear. It turned out to be quite escapist, but you can never tell. You know, you've got nothing to measure it against right now, and that's been the hardest thing for me. That's been harder than losing paid jobs because as a freelancer that happens, but the sense of disconnection with the general public has been quite difficult.
Really interesting. Well, let's hope. I mean, there seems to be some hope about that we might return to some kind of normality. Hopefully, not the same normality.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, isn't it? You just don't know what's going on from, like, this project started in July, so we've had waves of, oh, we're coming out of it and then we're going back in, and
Yes, yeah.
yeah, it makes it very, very tricky. Well, it's been brilliant to kind of meet you, and
Yes, and you,
I
yeah.
really look forward to when we're out and about, and obviously I'll have a big event at the auxiliary for when we're allowed, so we can all kind of meet and in person.
Yeah, and hopefully Weatherstone Dropped will be out there soon. I know the Ark have been talking about putting together a DVD for it because a lot of people have said they'd like to see it like on physical media. So, I mean, it is a shame that we've got knocked back to where we were this time last year, but where we were this time last year wasn't actually bad. You know, everything seemed to be going well. So it could be a lot worse. We could have been knocked back to a time when we didn't know if we could get it made at all.
Yeah. Okay, well, brilliant. Do keep me informed on that, and I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you. And if you send me your email address, I can transfer this audio track over to you.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Take
No
care.
problem. Bye.